Everybody, and thank you for joining us today for our latest Linetime webinar. So today we will be covering the Billing Wizard module and marking disbursements as recharges and grouping transactions. Steve, one of our accounts trainers, will be hosting the webinar today and taking you through the options that we have available for this. And I myself, Chanel, also an accounts trainer, I will be the panelist and I'll be fielding any questions that you have during the webinar. Towards the bottom of your screen, you will see a Q&A chat box. Can I ask that you use this area to send through any questions that you do have during the session? Steve takes you through the module and I'll do my best to answer all these questions when they pop up. We will, as usual, leave a short time after the presentation is finished to answer any further questions that you might have. On the screen in front of you, you should see a list of the areas that we are going to cover today. So the first thing that Steve will take you through is the new red globe option that we have available for this webinar, so for the recharges. The next thing that he'll show you is the transaction creation. Following on from that, he'll go into Liberate Admin and look at precedents and looking at recharges, the options that we have for merge codes for recharges, and also options that you have available for grouping disbursements on your bills. I just want to re-emphasise that the Q&A chat box is at the bottom of the screen, so please ask questions during the presentation. And anything that you do have later on that you might want to ask, you can send to support@linetime.co.uk. Well, that's enough from me, and I'll pass you over to Steve now.
Thank you, Chanel. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us. So as Chanel has already said, today we're going to be looking at Billing Wizard, and more specifically in Billing Wizard, we are looking at how to mark disbursements as cost transactions, recharges, and also how to group disbursements on your bill. So we'll first of all start off by looking at recharges and cost transactions. Now, the functionality that I'm about to show you is effectively it allows you to raise a disbursement. And once you've raised a disbursement, the functionality allows you to mark that disbursement as a cost transaction. Effectively a recharge. Now this all dates back, if you like, just a bit of history, this website that I've got here, which is the Brabner's case, if you like, and disbursement versus recharge, and effectively the fundamentals of the case were that certain transactions were being classed as disbursements, whereas Mr. Batman, HMRC came along and says, wait a minute, they're not disbursements. They are effectively part of your firm's services. And so therefore should incur output VAT and be part of your costs. Now, traditionally, after that, a lot of firms, when compiling bills, you'll have your disbursements and just take, for example, search flow. And you will have a search flow invoice whereby part of that invoice will be cost transactions, but you don't want to do it as a type 70 transaction liberate because that doesn't actually pay anything out. It just posts a profit cost. So you'll still post it as a disbursement, but then after the fact, you may come along to your bill template and copy and paste that search flow entry into the cost section. Or you may do that, or you may just take a view that I'm going to leave it in the disbursement section, but make sure it's got output VAT on it. So Mr. Batman's happy. But this change with the recharges that I'm about to take you through here, it negates the need for you to have to cut and paste disbursements into the right section of your bill. Now, it's important to stress that with recharges, marking disbursements as recharges or cost transactions, on a balance sheet, on your control accounts, the transactions are disbursements. When you look on the ledger, the transactions are disbursements. When you have reports, the transactions are disbursements. They are disbursements in every single sense, with the exception of when you come to merge and raise your bill, the system will put those transactions that you've marked as a recharge in the cost section rather than listing within the disbursement section. And that is the the functionality of recharges. So let's get into that. So first and foremost, in order to enable the functionality of recharges on your system, you will need version 201. That's version 201 of Liberate as a minimum. If you haven't got version 201, then it's just a case of contacting Linetime support and asking for an upgrade. But if you have got version 201, then great, you will have this functionality. First of all, to enable recharges, on the top left from command level, you've got the red circle and you've got this option here. So if you go to the red globe options and admin options in the bottom left, and then once on admin options, if you click on financials, and once you've clicked on financials, you will see there an option called enable ability to post recharges. You will need to click on this in order to for your system to have the functionality to post recharges. Once that's ticked, the first option that I will show you is, well, then how now, once you've ticked that and you've got version 201 of Liberate, how do we mark transactions or disbursements, more to the point, as recharges? Well, first of all, or as a recharge transaction, first of all, on postings, disbursements, and click on disbursement, you will notice on the disbursement screens, once that red globe option is ticked, that you will have an extra box here, which is entitled recharge. Now, you will have that box on disbursements, unpaid disbursements. Within here, you'll notice there for unpaid disbursements, you've got the recharge as well. And you've also got that box for office to nominal transactions. So whether you are doing an unpaid disbursement, standard disbursement, or an office to nominal, you do have the option to post that as a recharge. And like I say, just to re-emphasize again, is that marking a transaction or a disbursement, sorry, as a recharge, it is a disbursement in every sense. The only point that this recharge flag comes into play is at the point of billing. When you merge your bill, the system knows to put this transaction that has been marked as a recharge in the cost section rather than listing underneath the disbursement section. So you've got that option on the accounts postings. Now I'm going to move over to the transaction side, which is in admin and transaction creation. So I'm going to open up Liberate Admin. And we've got our transaction types here. Now, this is just one example on screen. We've got a transaction type, transaction header. So this is just one example. You'll notice in the top right, we've got the finance type 63, standard disbursement. And you'll notice when you get an upgrade, when you're on version 201, that you have this extra tick button, which is recharge again. And it just means now that whenever anyone requests this transaction for land registries, searches, and inquiries, whenever anyone requests this transaction, the system knows to flag this as a cost transaction. So disbursement, fine. But when it comes to billing, put it underneath the cost section rather than listing it within the disbursements. Again, same as your standard posting screens, you've got the recharge option on type 63 disbursements. You've also got the recharge option on unpaid disbursements, which is type 67. You'll notice there the recharge option. And you've also got the recharge option on type 69 transactions, office to nominal. And again, you've got the recharge flag there. Okay, so that's the first section. So the first section we've gone through, we've looked at the red globe option and we've ticked the little red globe button to say, yes, we want to start using recharges. We've now created some transactions and we've ticked the recharge flag to say this will be a recharge. It's great. And also we've looked at the posting screens from an accounts perspective where you can see that the recharge flag is set on the posting screens. Now that's all well and good, but even with marking transactions as being recharges, we still need to update our bill template. The bill template needs to be constructed in such a way that the system knows this is where the recharges will be listed, because the system will list the recharges, even though they're part of the cost transactions, the system will still list all of the recharge transactions. So first of all then, let's go into a bill template on Liberate. Now here's one I had open earlier. And just looking at this bill template, and again, if you are familiar with the way that bill templates are coded, then fantastic. I'll try and keep this really simplistic, but this is a basic bill template. Now you should, if you're aware of how bill templates are coded, every single bill template that you'll have will have a listing command here. And a listing command is a star and some letters. And the star and the letters indicates to Liberate what it should be listing. And so, for example, here, star LNA will list all of your type 70 transactions that are non-admin fees. So it's star L non-admin. And then we've got star LA, which is list all the type 70 transactions, which are the admin fees. I'll miss out the star RC because you might have guessed already what that is. But we've got underneath this as well, we've got star D, which is going to list your disbursements. And we've also got star A, which will list your unpaid disbursements. Now the process, and it's quite a simple process actually when you actually think about it, in that we've marked some disbursements as to be recharges, which are cost transactions. So what the system does is you've now got this new listing command, which is star RC, which is star recharges, star RC. And so I've highlighted the star RC on my bill template here, just so that you can see it. When we go into Billing Wizard, you'll be able to clearly see where the recharges sit within the bill. But you'll notice that the star RC is going to list the recharges disbursements. The merge codes within that listing command are exactly the same as what you would see in star D and star A, simply because, like I say, just to repeating myself over and over again, they are in essence just a disbursement, but it's that flag the system knows to treat them differently. So star RC will list all of our recharges on my bill here. It's important to note that whenever you have marked a disbursement as a recharge, the system will then exclude those disbursements from these listing commands. The system will exclude these disbursements from the listing commands of star D and star A. Really important because, you know, a lot of the time when we make changes to the system, when Linetime makes changes to the system, we'll make it so that, you know, it doesn't affect your current functionality. And so even with the recharges functionality here, it doesn't matter. You can carry on working how you're working as long as you don't tick the red globe option and then start marking transactions as recharges, etc. You will see no change to functionality. But if you did tick the red globe option to enable recharges, then obviously then you've got some setup to start doing. Because if you tick the red globe option, start marking transactions as recharges, if you do not amend your bill template to include the star RC, then your bill template won't balance. I.e., what you'd have here is the disbursements would be excluded from star D, star A, but then they wouldn't be listed anywhere else on the bill. And so therefore your bill just would not balance and it would be incorrect. So it's important that if you are clicking the red globe option and you wanting to use this functionality, first and foremost, set your transactions in a transaction type. So the transactions which should be recharges, tick the little recharge button, and then come to your bill template and add in the star RC listing command here. Right, that is done. So I'm going to save and close that bill. And I'm going to go to the front end. So this is a case. So I'm already in a case here. I've already created a case previously. And I'm in Billing Wizard already, just to save some time. You don't need to see me going into Billing Wizard. Now, what I've done is if I click on the disbursement section, I've posted 2 recharges here. So I've got an index map search, which is a recharge, land registry searches, which are marked as recharges, and mining search fee, which is also marked as a recharge. These bottom 4 options are not recharges, just so that you can see that when I merge the bill, you can see how the recharges show on the bill and also how the system treats non-recharges as well, which is effectively the same as what it currently does. When you're in the bill wizard here, you'll notice again, they are disbursements. If I go to the ledger, so if I look, this is my bill. If I go to the ledger, these are all still disbursements. Type, disp, unbilled, etc. Let's bill these now. So if I go to draft this bill, and you will see if I go into the review bills and merge the bill. So this is my bill. Right click, I'm going to produce the bill now. And it's just to demonstrate really how you can see now, because I've highlighted them yellow, you'll be able to see how they pull through onto the bill. So we've got our standard bill. These are my TT fees, which is the star L, or will even be star LNA, or star LA, sorry. These are my recharges. So you'll notice that index map search all highlighted in yellow. And then these are my disbursements. What I want to highlight to you on this bill is these are still disbursements on the ledger, but if you notice in the total legal services, that is the total now of all of my recharges, cost transactions, and the time that I had on file, which is 929.98. You'll notice that these index map search, etc., are not included within my disbursements. And so therefore, the total disbursements is 690, which is just here. And then obviously the total VAT and the total net, total payable, etc. as standard. And so it's important when you are looking, when you're doing your bill, when you're doing all of your testing, you know, just making sure, oh yeah, that's great. They are now effectively cost transactions in the legal services and the cost transactions. But when you're looking on the ledger, they are essentially disbursements. And so that's how within Liberate, that's how you can essentially mark a disbursement as a cost transaction. You're just moving it above the line. Now, there's one thing that I want to highlight and just make sure that you understand this clearly. When you are creating your transactions, so if we go back to the transaction types, and I've got my transaction here as a recharge, you need to ensure that the VAT rate has 20% output VAT on it. So the output is 20%. If you think this through, it's still a disbursement. And so all that's happening is, you know, all that Linetime, all that we've done with this change is we've amended the merge code so that the merge codes work differently. But you want to ensure that the output VAT is still 20%. And so I can choose here, we've got a VAT code of 5, which is 0 input, 20% output. And so I know when it comes to producing the bill, the system will put output VAT on this and put it in the right section of the bill. You've also got here, you can use standard. What you don't want to be doing though, is choosing 0. And then what you'll have is you'll have these recharges pull through onto your bill, 0 output, but then you may have some time on the bill as well, which might incur 20%. And so then it kind of doesn't make sense because you've got half of your cost transactions as 20%, and then half of the cost transactions, which is some recharges, as 0 rated. So just make sure that when you are creating the transactions here, that you choose a VAT rate of, well, it's got 20% output VAT on it. So it will pull through onto your bill correctly. Okay, so those are your recharges in a nutshell. Like I say, it's quite an easy process. Once you get into it, it's just marking transactions as recharges and then adding the star RC onto your bill template, which will then list all of the recharges. Okay. Next, we'll look at grouping. So obviously, when I came on to do my bill and I merged my bill here, you may or may not have noticed, but when I produced my bill, we had several transactions of each. And so we had 3 telegraphic transfer fees, we've got 2 index map searches, we've got 2 land registry searching and inquiries, and we've got 2 mining search fees. We've also got 2 of each of the disbursements below, which will tie us nicely into grouping disbursements and how you can group disbursements on your bill so that rather than having 3 entries for telegraphic transfer fees, you'll only see 1 line, and you'll only see 1 line with index map search, etc. Okay. So first of all, then, in order to group transactions, this is held upon your bill templates. So in order to group transactions, you need to go onto the bill templates. So I'm going to go back into admin. And I'm going to open up a bill template, a precedent. I've already got a precedent here, already started, which is individual grouped bill. So I'm going to double click on that and open that up. Oops. Okay. Grouping transactions and the logic behind grouping transactions is, again, it's really simplistic. It's a really simplistic method in that when looking at your bill template, you'll notice on the previous one, which wasn't grouping, I just had star LNA and I had star LA, star RC, star D, star A, you get the gist. In order to group transactions, all you need to add is a G and 2 pipes. I will explain why the pipes aren't necessary later on, but it's really, really easy. I mean, the G, obviously, for group. So star LNA group that, star LAG group. Obviously, if I didn't put the G and 2 pipes next to them, then the system wouldn't group them. They would just list them individually. So it is possible to say, I want to group the recharges, but for disbursements, I do not want to group those. So therefore, you would just take the G and the 2 pipes off, and the system would simply list them individually as per the example that I've already shown. But when you are coding your bill templates, in order to group transactions, it is simply a case of putting on a G after the listing command and 2 pipes. Again, I will explain why those pipes are there towards the end of the webinar. Really simple. Now, what is the system doing when it's grouping? What's the logic behind the grouping of transactions? When you are grouping transactions, the system will group, and I'm just going to click back on the transaction types here. Within admin, the transaction types. When grouping transactions on your bill template, the system will group by the transaction code. Really important to note. The system will group by the transaction code and group all those transactions together. You may look at this, if I go back to my bill template again, and you may look at this and think, okay, well, that's fine. The amount's obvious because the system will just sum all of the amounts and sum the VAT amounts. That's fine. But then how will the system pick up if there's different descriptions? The system will group by the transaction code, but also the system will then use the default values in the description and extra description on your transaction header. So that is important to know. If on your ledger you've got lots of variations of extra description and people are putting something different, or the descriptions might be different, it doesn't matter. When you are grouping, the system will come along and say, I'm going to use this description on the transaction header and this description on the extra description, if you are pulling through both of those values. And so just looking at this bill template here, I'm now grouping all of these. So I'm going to go back, front end. This is my bill that I raised earlier. I'm going to right click over the bill, change bill template. I can now change my bill template to this individual grouped bill, press OK, and merge this bill again. And when I merge this bill, you will see, here we go, how now, when I merge it, really simplistic, that I've now got one line for my telegraphic transfer fees, and you notice that the system has summed all of those entries. I've got one line for the index map searches, land registry searches, etc., etc. Also on the disbursements, we've got one line for each of the disbursements because we had two before. The values will still pull in, it's exactly the same. So the cost transactions and my recharges, my total legal services and my disbursements are still the total disbursements. So you can see there that the benefits of grouping, it just enables your bill to just look a bit tidier. You don't get those duplicates. One point that I want to highlight with this is we're looking at this and thinking, well, okay, that's fine in that the system will group by the transaction code in admin. That's all well and good. But then if you're using normal accounts posting screens, how does the system treat normal accounts postings as well as then the grouping commands? Well, let's do that. So first of all, let's go into command level. And on this same file, we will post a disbursement, which is a standard disbursement. Obviously, if you are posting from the accounts posting screens, you do not have a transaction code. And so therefore, in this instance, if I'm posting a transaction, a disbursement through the accounts posting screens, not through the transactions area, the system cannot group it because there's no transaction code for it to group under. And so if I just put this as a Disp webinar transaction, and just post that on, let's call it £150. Do I want to mark it as a recharge? I won't mark it as a recharge for now, but just so that you can see it. So it's Disp webinar transaction, and I'll post that on. What you'll see the system will do now is it won't group it, but it will just list it below individually. The system will never group transactions which are posted from the accounts posting screens. So if I just press edit bill detail on my bill, go to my disbursements, here's my webinar transaction that I just posted. I'm going to include that in my bill now and press draft again. Now if I merge my bill, right click, produce bill, you will see that we'll still have all of my recharges here, that's fine. The system is grouping those two, which is still okay, but then below, we've got the Disp webinar transaction. And so, you know, it is possible on here to have a combination of the both of transactions and standard accounts postings, because it might be that some transactions you just want to get onto the ledger really quickly and not have to go through auto post, and therefore that's why certain firms will use the accounts posting screens, whereas I appreciate that other firms won't use the accounts posting screens, and therefore, you know, all transactions will be grouped, which is great. Okay, marvelous. Right, the last option that I want to show you then that I did promise as part of the webinar, which is when we go back to our bill template and we're looking at the bill template for grouping, and we've got these two pipes. And the obvious question then is, wait a minute, what are those two pipes used for? Why couldn't we just have star DG? Why do we need the two pipes? The two pipes essentially allow you as a firm, allow you as a user to isolate transactions on your bill. And so therefore, when you are looking at your bill template here, you could look at this and say, as part of my recharges, I only want the system to list my index map searches. And so in between the pipes, you'd put the transaction code, which if I put in here IMS, and I just put in the transaction code in between the pipes, and it's adding functionality to the system. And so if you notice there, RCG, I'm grouping, but in between the two pipes, I have put in IMS. Now, what the system will do here is it will only group the transactions where the transaction code is IMS. You could put in more and put a comma and put in another transaction code. That's fine, and then you can group those. But we've isolated this to be IMS. If I save and close this and now merge my bill, you will notice I've gone back to my case, billing wizard, produce bill. You will notice now that on my bill template, it only shows the index map searches. It's not showing the land reg inquiry searches as it did previously. You've got to be really, really, really careful if you are isolating certain transaction codes on your bill template, because now I've told the system to only list IMS, index map searches. My bill doesn't balance because I've got included on my bill all those other transactions, but I haven't listed them. They're not included on any listing commands because 700 plus 90 plus 106 does not equal 929.98. And so therefore, on here, if I go back to my grouping, I would have to construct my bill in such a way that I include all transaction codes within a listing command somewhere. And it's really, really, really important in that, you know, the functionality could be that I'll explain why the functionality is here, because you could have insert another line above here, and this could be called index searches and highlight that. And it's a way that you can construct your bill templates. And now I can insert a couple more lines below and call this one land reg searches. And I know that I can just copy and paste this listing command below there. And we've got here, and instead of IMS, I'll put that transaction code to be LRSE, which is the land reg searches and inquiries. And so now I know what will happen here is the system will only list the transaction codes where it's IMS, and it will only list underneath here the transactions which are LRSE. If, like the above here, you have no transaction codes within the pipes, the system will list everything. And it's important to note that the system will list everything. And that's why, as part of the course, 90% of firms will just not have any transaction codes within the listing commands. And so the system just lists everything. And there's no way then that your bill won't balance. But here I'm listing two separate transaction codes, save and close. If I go back to my bill now, merge that again, and obviously you'll get the gist of it. In that when we right click produce bill, we've got index searches, it's just grouping my index searches, and land reg, it's just grouping my land reg. But again, it still doesn't balance because I haven't listed the last disbursements, which I know have been included on my bill. And so that's why you've just got to be ultra, ultra, ultra careful when you are using the isolation, if you like, in between the pipes on your bill. And that is grouping and recharges. Quite straightforward, but obviously there's some setup to do behind it. But once it's going, then it's quite straightforward to use. I will hand back over to Chanel for any questions.
Thanks for that, Steve. I've answered one of the questions that we have had. But I just thought that we had one question about the recharges merge code, and someone asked if it's possible. So I'll read it out. Actually, it's probably easier. Is there a total recharges merge code?
Yes.
So if you want to just break the total recharge down in the bill.
Yes, there is. Yes, there is. I think it's angle brackets recharges. Lauren, I can email you the merge code. In fact, let me just find it here. What was the next question, Shannon? But there's a total recharges merge code, and there's a total VAT on recharges merge code as well.
That's perfect. So that's answered your question, Lauren. The final one was, I was literally halfway through typing the answer when you finished, so I thought it's easy to answer it live. Can you exclude certain transaction types from the grouping command? So if you have a general office debit transaction, for miscellaneous transactions, we wouldn't want them grouped together.
No, I see where you're coming from. No, it wouldn't not group those. The only way to exclude transactions from grouping is to post them via the accounts posting screens. Otherwise, the system's going to group all transactions by the transaction code. You can have it whereby if I go back to here, which a lot of people do, Lauren, which is a good question. If you have certain if it's a different transaction codes, then you can group all of your StarL transactions together, admin transactions together, recharges together, but then it might be that disbursements, because you've got that variation, that you just leave the disbursements to list individually. But no, unfortunately, as part of the Star DG, it will group all transactions. There's no way to say group these transactions, but don't group these transactions, if you know what I mean.
So we've not had any more questions coming in.
Okay.
We'll leave it a few more seconds. Oh, wait, always happens, doesn't it? The moment we're about to finish. I do not think recharge is relevant in business, but I think grouping transactions.
No.
I wanted to check. You don't have to use the recharge to be able to group. No. Absolutely not.
Absolutely not. You can, they are absolutely individual functionalities. So you can use the grouping, but not use the recharges, absolutely. Just make sure, in order to not use the recharges, don't tick the red globe option, and obviously don't go into admin and start clicking transactions to be recharges. Then it's fine, but you can still go into the bill template and use the grouping. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, the two different, the sort of two separate functionalities, so to speak. So yeah, if you don't want to use recharges, just don't switch it on in the red globe. Anything else I'm going to say again? So it looks like we haven't got any more questions. I'll just leave a few more seconds, guys, if you want to quickly get them in.
If you are typing, just quickly type in.
Yeah, quickly say, or even just type, just click send now, so that it might be half a message, but we can get the rest of it in a second. We'll give you enough time, guys. But it looks like people are dropping off now. So yeah, it looks like. Right, thank you everybody for joining today, and thank you, Steve, as usual. Your webinars are amazing, and they're very self-explanatory and give us a lot of information. So we hope that you all have a lovely weekend, and we will see you soon for our next webinar, which I believe maybe.
Is it RepGen?
Yeah, I think with us it's RepGen. Yeah, I don't think it's for a few weeks yet.
Right.
But yeah, I think the next accounts one is RepGen. Yeah, so the 15th of July. But I'm sure there might be some more coming up case related at some point. But yeah, so thank you everybody for coming, and we will speak to you all soon.
See you later, everybody.
Bye.
Take it easy. Stay safe.